All
Hi,
right.
everybody. Thank you so very, very much for being here today. Um, we are very, very happy to be welcoming Mr. Michael Pisano. Um, Mr. Michael is a documentary filmmaker. His first career aspiration was to be a dinosaur, which I can relate to. 35-ish years later, he makes films about sustainability and solidarity. Currently, he's editing a series of documentaries and podcasts for the Carnegie Museum of Natural History about climate change resilience in southwestern Pennsylvania. He also makes fantasy games about collaboration in the face of doom. My aside, unfortunately, those might be training manuals rather than fantasy games pretty soon. But together, he thinks we can fight for a joyous future. And that's the point. That's the big point of that. So with no further ado or editorializing from me, it is my pleasure to introduce you all to Mr. Michael Pisano.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I didn't know there was going to be an intro. Thanks so much for having me again. And yeah, I'll jump right in. I think since I'm going to be showing some videos today, and I find that Zoom is usually kind of crappy for the frame rate and all that, I just slapped together a really quick website that we can all look at together. And at some points, I'll start sharing my screen and kind of step through it together. But that's got all the videos and images and stuff that we'll talk about today. Yeah, do you generally do intros for this? Like have people drop their name in something icebreakery in the chat, or
if you'd like, absolutely. But you're also, more than welcome to just dive right in.
Okay.
And
you know what? I'll barrel right ahead. And if people have like questions, any sort of commentary throughout, drop it in the chat, come off mute and butt in. That's totally 100% good.
And I will, I'll be monitoring the chat in case there are any comments or questions in the chat.
I am very bad at keeping track of all
I got
that, so
you.
I love it if you brought them to my attention. Thanks, Jeremy.
Of course.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm Michael. I'm 35.
That link in the chat is not working for me. I'm on my computer. Also.
Okay. What happens when you click on it? And is anyone else having that trouble?
It came up for me.
Yeah.
It says this site can't be reached. Here, let me just look it up on my phone.
Yeah, it may be your internet at home might not have enough the capability right now to be streaming this or connected to this and opening that up. So give it a shot on your phone, see if that works for you.
If it doesn't, maybe I'll share my screen and play it. You can see the choppy version, which is better than nothing for sure. Yeah, so I'm 35 and like Jeremy said, I mostly work on video and animation work for documentary and educational kind of content. And then on the side, though more and more connected, I'm also making art, mostly in game format. And all of it is kind of coalescing around climate change, climate justice, climate mitigation, all that good stuff. And we'll see that as we kind of go through. But because of that kind of thematic connection point, I am trying out a new, Michael, what do you do? I try to answer that now with I'm a climate storyteller. I'm still figuring out what that means. Maybe at the end, you could tell me if it makes sense based on what I show you, or if you have any better ideas. But yeah, in clearer terms of what I do for cash, I am a freelance filmmaker specializing in educational videos and for and about documentary work, which means that a nonprofit, a university, a museum will hire you to make a documentary about an aspect of the institution. So it could be a researcher at Pitt. It could be a program at a nonprofit. And while that's pretty exclusively the kind of work that I do now, when I started my career, I kind of took on any kind of video or animation work that was available. And we'll look at some silly stuff from that era. But I mean, I've done everything from music videos to marketing, event documentation, concerts, video game animation, also waited tables and done a bunch of other random jobs. But some of the clients that I've worked with are Twitter, Duolingo, Pitt, the Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy, Remake Learning, and like Jeremy mentioned, right now I'm working with the Carnegie Museum of Natural History. And we'll talk a little bit more about that project at the end, but The short story is that we're talking to, I think it's 32 different interviews about different communities in southwestern Pennsylvania and how they deal with climate change, how they're mitigating and preparing for it, and how they're dealing with issues of climate justice. And that's pretty much a dream project for me. So I've been making videos since I was in high school, but doing it as a full-time living for about 10 years now. And before, I guess, digging in any further, I'm gonna share my screen and shut up for a minute and we can watch a video. Let's see. Cool. So do you guys see the same fun column of videos?
We
Did I
do.
it right?
Yeah, I can see.
Awesome. All right. So we're just gonna start with this reel. And this is just kind of like a thing that we use for marketing. Were you able to troubleshoot your own website? I don't know if that was Trinity or Tehran.
That was Trin.
It was me. Yeah, I have it on my phone, but it's working.
Okay. How's it look when I play it here?
It looks fine.
Okay, good enough. Here, let's see what happens if I full screen it. You can still see that?
Yeah, working perfectly.
All right. Yep. So a reel is something that you make kind of as like a way to pitch yourself to new clients. And so in 2016, I was looking for specifically nature documentary work, but also knew that I would probably need some other types of work. I'll just shut up like I said I was going to. All right. And I also wanted to show just a really quick animation reel because that's actually my background. That's where I came to making video.
Love Saul Williams.
Yeah.
Trinity, you just said in the chat, this is so cool.
Oh, well, thanks. I'm hoping that this is like a restful Friday kind of vibe too, that we're just gonna kind of zone out and watch some videos and chatter a little bit.
My kind of Friday.
Cool. So, yeah, I wanted to start with those, I think because around 5 years ago when I made both of those, was when I started really focusing in on climate and environmental things. I had been starting into educational work a little bit before that, but yeah, well, okay. I just thought also they were a nice place to start because they're calm. And let's see. And yes, I did make all those myself. There's the chat. Sorry, I had that closed up. Though in the second one, I actually had help for some of that animation because animation is often like a big team sport kind of effort. But yeah, so just kind of scrolling on down, you can still see this window. You can see a silly picture of me as a kid.
Yes.
Wonderful. Yeah, I was not actually born in Italy, like this says, that my first grade teacher really messed that up. From New Jersey, a little town that was a farm when I was born, and by the time I was leaving, it was a kind of a suburb. It was really close to New York City and Philly, kind of an hour from each on a train. It was a really nice place to grow up, and there's a lot of kind of green space around, especially when I was young, and that helped me kind of get an early interest in natural sciences. Yes, I've spent a lot of time on New Jersey Transit. And the other thing that I did a lot was draw. So these are some drawings that I made over the past kind of 5 years. And my mom is a artist, and she always just encouraged me to have papers, like what I did when friends came over, made drawings, prints, books, all that kind of stuff. And I came to Pittsburgh for college, during which I looked kind of silly, good for me. And in college, I went to Carnegie Mellon here in Pittsburgh, and I double majored in art and creative writing. And in the art program, I found kind of a home.
What did you major in again?
Say again?
What did
What
you
I
major
majored in?
in again? Yeah.
Yeah, I double majored in art and creative writing. And the art side of it, we also had like concentrations within our major, and mine was electronic and time-based media, which basically just meant like video and animation, and for some people robotics and kind of fancier stuff. But I got really into video pretty much right away, and I made a lot of very silly looking videos to start. But then in 2007, between my sophomore and my junior year, I got a grant from my college, just like a couple $1,000 to go across the country on a road trip over a summer to make a documentary and take a bunch of photos. And so I actually dusted off some old hard drives earlier this week, and I found the first documentary that I ever edited, which we're going to watch 2.5 minutes of right here. And it's a long time ago.
It's weird to think of just how long ago 2007 actually was.
It really is wild.
People around here who just want to
Make me
figure
very
out how to live off the grid and off the electrical grid and off of every other grid that they can, you know. And people who were sort of in the condition I was, which is you just couldn't quite deal with life and the world and your personal life and everything else. And the easiest thing to do then was to go live in a place where you just had to worry about the basics, staying warm, you know, getting firewood, you know, hauling water. And there's a certain ease in that, because when you just have to do that, when that's what you have to concentrate on, that's the stuff you can deal with that. You don't have to worry about it. And it takes up, yeah, and it takes up your life, you know.
I'm just sorry about this. I don't know what I was thinking. I was in art school. I don't know.
I'll tell you like this. I don't have a cell phone because every time I go to answer, I think it's my wife. Like that split second that the phone rings, or that millionth of a second, I want to talk to her so bad. I feel like I want her to call me because that's why I originally got cell phones. And it's driving me out of my fucking mind. You know, I miss her a lot, and I always think about that. That split. I know she's there with that split, just with the phone ring. Just, ooh, I can talk to her. You know. Yeah.
Whew, that was a little bit of a roller coaster. Sorry. That was the same year that Katrina happened. I don't know if you recognize those images, but we had already planned this trip and planned to stop through New Orleans. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's like it's clear to you. You were born in 2007. Oh my God. Okay.
I know. I was just thinking. I was like, that's not as funny as you think it is.
Oh no, it's funny. It just makes me feel totally wild.
Quick question. I'm
Is
sorry to
35
interrupt
old?
you, Mr. Michael.
Yeah.
Ron and Trinity, when we talk about Katrina, Hurricane Katrina, do you all know what happened in Hurricane Katrina?
It was like a category 4, I think.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Just to make sure you're both aware of what happened. There was a lot of controversy about it. It was under George W. Bush's presidency, and there was a lot of controversy about the way that he and FEMA, which is the Federal Emergency Management Association, responded to that. I was like, well, another acronym in Pittsburgh. The way that he and they responded to that crisis. The humanitarian aid wasn't, and the response wasn't as fast or as thorough as really anybody would like. There were people stranded on rooftops for a lot, like weeks. And people were, you know, shuttled into the football stadium and stuff like that, and temporary shelters were set up, even though this kind of thing was not new for New Orleans and the Gulf Coast. So it was very, very controversial. And in addition to that, it was really a national tragedy, to the point that the international community, other countries, were sending money and supplies to the United States, to New Orleans, to help people. And even, I mean, my wife and I went to New Orleans only 3 or 4 years ago, and they're still recovering from it, you know, a decade, 2 decades later. So big deal. And, you know, I know that you all were babies or neonatal at the time that it happened, but, you know, the ripple effect of Hurricane Katrina is still felt today for a lot of people. So just wanted to make sure y'all knew what that was. Sorry to hijack your.
No, thank you for the context. That's really helpful. I wasn't going to talk much more about that piece, but just to say that, you know, it was my first time holding a camera and going out and trying to talk to people. And it was this crazy, you know, we went to 47 states. We drove all across the country. And there was this wild kind of variance in the experience we had, where some of it was really serious, like speaking to people in the aftermath of Katrina that had happened maybe 2 months prior. And, you know, the place that we ended up and did all the interviews was a demonstration against HUD, the housing authority there, who were trying to shut down a housing situation instead of fixing it and kicking hundreds of people out, which was a pretty common thing then. And then there was also like talking to old hippies about homesteading. There was being in Colorado and talking to people about the beauty of the Rockies. Yes. And yeah, I think it really wet my whistle for this kind of work. But that said, in 2008, I graduated, and it was kind of a bad time for the economy. There was like a recession, kind of like, I mean, not as bad, I think, as what's happening now, but it was really hard to find jobs. A lot of my friends and I who graduated that year were having a tough time in the job market. So the first year after school, I worked half-time, luckily, for Carnegie Mellon. They were able to hire me as an archival video editor, like sifting through really old film reels and stuff that they had just collected over the years. And the other half time I waited tables. I also started freelancing. I made some really terrible rap music videos. I tried to find them, but I can't find them. I'm sorry. They're like on physical tapes somewhere. I also designed posters, album art. I mean, I like just did anything I could for cash that year. And I think that that's a super normal, like year after college or first year after high school kind of thing to do while you're trying to figure out what you want and what opportunities are available to just kind of like try a lot of things. I also found the time to playing a really like crippling amount of World of Warcraft, but that's kind of its own. So the next year in 2009, I was kind of unsure that I was going to find opportunity in Pittsburgh. So I moved to San Francisco, and I moved with one of my best pals. And I applied for 97 jobs without getting a single interview. And then I finally did get an internship at a video game startup. And I had applied for an animation job, and they said, we filled our animation job, but we need a marketing and business development intern. And I said, I need a job, so that's totally fine. And it turned out to be a really great opportunity, super educational. My boss was a very experienced marketing person who taught me, I think, the biggest takeaway I remember now, a decade and change on, was to be confident and not to be afraid to ask people, especially about money. Having been trained in the arts, I mean, we never talked about money. Before I went to college, no one talked to me about debt. Like, I didn't know about money. I was still learning the hard way. And in this job, we were working with Nintendo and Sega and these huge companies. And, I was pitching these projects for my company that had $500,000 price tags. And I had to get comfortable with that. And I took that forward to my own work, where I'm not doing $500,000 documentary projects, but I'm not afraid to ask for what I'm worth, and for what the time of the people I work with, most importantly, is worth. That said, they weren't paying me very well. I was getting paid $1,500 a month. I was working 60 hours a week. I still had a girlfriend back in Pittsburgh. And so I gave it almost 2 years, and then I left and I came back. And I came back actually with an opportunity to work on a documentary at CMU with some old people who I had maintained a little bit of touch with. And it was about a commercial robotics project to send a rover to the moon. And honestly, it's like super dry. It's really nice. It's really informative. The people are super passionate, but I mean, we can watch a second of it. I don't know.
The Apollo pictures pretty much convinced everyone that the moon was obviously worthless. It looked like an abandoned cement plant. Who could think of anything that was useful there? But you have to recall that the early settlers crossing the United States felt the same way about Nebraska, Kansas, North Dakota. It took a while, but then they figured out that entire Great Plains could become the breadbasket of the world. It seems to me that the moon is analogous to the Great Plains in some ways. Because no one really has been there for very long or done very much, we're ignorant. And a place that big, almost the size of North and South America, has resources. It's an entire continent that is unexplored. And I am firmly convinced that once we get people and robots exploring the moon, the spirit of the global civilization will be lifted when people recognize, hey, there is a frontier. We do have a place to expand and to learn new things.
All of the technology exists to go to the moon. All of the electronics, all of the propulsion, everything exists in the commercial form. You can go buy it. The one thing that you can't go get as easily is the money. So you have to create funding. You have to create a business. You have to create an opportunity that people identify. I'm
going to pause it there. I think you kind of get the idea. I think that this was a really valuable experience for me, in that I started learning some foundational skills about documentary making. I mean, you saw the previous attempt that I made in 2007, and that was like amateur hour, but it was also a really good learning experience. I think that I started to understand that you can have a great idea, and you can, you don't need to have really fancy technology. I mean, I bought this DSLR for $100 used, and I shot that documentary on it. But what you do need, and what I didn't have in the first one, was help from experienced people. So I was very lucky when I came back to Pittsburgh in 2011 to meet a lot of people who were working in the video kind of field, and they were all really giving with their knowledge. No one kind of kept information away from each other. Everyone liked to share, and also people like to help each other with labor. And so I guess I would really encourage you, if you're trying to learn something new, especially something that's got a lot of moving parts, something that's creative, to find collaborators. Anyway, I worked on this for about 1.5 years. We were pursuing funding with like Comcast 3D. We were trying to get someone to send a camera to the moon with us. There was like all sorts of different cool prospects, but eventually I asked a lot of questions that I think made people aggravated about mining resources on the moon, which I thought like maybe there were some ethical questions around. It was a whole kind of, it ended up that I found myself, I don't know, a little bit disillusioned, and that's not a good vibe. So I left that project, and I decided to set out on my own for freelancing. So, I mean, I needed some cash. So I put my creative writing degree to use, and I started ghostwriting some memoirs for people. And I also started working at galleries at the Cultural Trust downtown while I started wrangling up freelance video clients. And that next year, 2012, I was able to, again, really hustle and run around and just talk to a lot of people without any shame, just asking, hey, do you need any video work? Hey, do you need any video work? Friends, prior employers, any connection I had, I just went for it. And I ended up working on a really wild variety of things. So I'm going to show you another reel from now 10 years ago almost that kind of expresses that variety of projects that I was working on then. Is like the audio and everything cool when I play these videos? It's working? All right, I shouldn't worry about it.
Absolutely, yeah, no, thank you.
You did get to see a little bit of a weird bad rap video after all in there. I forgot about that. Sorry about the gratuitous butts. That was a thing that was happening then. But yeah, like I said, I guess looking back on that variety of projects, I think my takeaway there is that trying new things is fantastic. Maybe that's obvious, but both professionally and in my personal life, I I think that there's kind of a conventional wisdom to settling on a single career path or a focus. And I wasn't really sure what I wanted. I was enjoying concert documentation. I was enjoying all these different little opportunities that I was getting. And there was still kind of this kernel in the back of my mind of like, you know, I really love nature and education and storytelling around that kind. You know, when I went home at night, I wasn't watching concert documentation or like, yeah, I was watching Planet Earth. I was watching like very chill David Attenborough stuff. And so that was kind of in my head. And the next year I got an opportunity through a professor at CMU who was starting an educational project called Social Change 101, which we can just kind of click over and look at for a second. But it was a web series that he had gotten some grant funding for about the history of social change movements. And then we also expanded it slowly over time to make some work about Larmer, which at the time was being redeveloped with a big Choice Neighborhoods grant. And we can just take a look at a little bit of this stuff. So for this project here, he initially said, hey, do you want to make 3 videos about Rachel Carson? And I said, sure, I love Rachel Carson. Does everyone know who Rachel Carson is? If you do, drop it in the chat, come off mute, or if you don't, that's totally cool.
Sadly, I don't.
Oh, don't be sad at all. Be happy that we're going to learn now. Rachel Carson was an environmentalist from right outside of Pittsburgh, and she is famous for fighting a pesticide called DDT. And DDT was something that, I don't know if you've ever seen like old newsreels of like a big pesticide truck rolling through a town and blowing, like billowing white kind of pesticide stuff all over neighborhood children. They dance around. People weren't like aware that some of these chemicals were as harmful as they are. And the real problem that DDT posed was out in the wild. Well, actually, let me show you an animation. Jeez.
My mother-in-law told me once that she and her friends used to, when the DDT, you guys might know it as DEET, when the DDT plane would fly over, she and all of her friends would run along underneath it.
Terrifying.
Right?
But yeah,
Take the case
super
of
common.
Clear Lake, California. Some 90 miles north of San Francisco, Clear Lake was a breeding site for swan grebes, majestic birds that build their nests directly on the lake's surface. In addition to the grebes, Clear Lake was also home to gnats, pesky little insects that pose no serious threat to humans. Beginning in 1949, California officials sprayed Clear Lake with dichloro-diphenyl dichloroethane, DDD, a relative of the more famous DDT. After the first spraying, the gnats disappeared for a while. When they returned, the authorities responded with another spraying, and then another, and then another. While the gnats continued to play peekaboo and the authorities continued to spray, the grebes began to die in large numbers. Autopsies revealed massive concentrations of DDD in the fat of the grebes. The chemical was thousands of times more concentrated in the bodies of the grebes than in the lake itself. How was that possible? Imagine you're a fish, a little fish. You eat little plants, each one with a small amount of DDD that it has absorbed from the water. Every time you eat a bite, the DDD lodges in your fat and stays there. The more you eat, the more DDD builds up in your body. One day, you get eaten by a big fish. Now, all that DDD that is built up in you gets passed along to the big fish. But the big fish doesn't just eat you. He eats a lot of little fish, so his concentration of DDD expands even higher. As Carson put it, the large carnivores had eaten the smaller carnivores that had eaten the herbivores that had eaten the plankton that had absorbed the poison from the water. And all the way up the food chain, the chemical had become more concentrated.
So that was a big problem. And it led to, I think, a really famous thing was that bald eagle populations plummeted. I mean, I think we were down to like 200 pairs of bald eagles in the country at one point, which is not great for your mascot or your national bird, national animal. And so Rachel Carson was an environmentalist from our area who wrote a book called Silent Spring and lobbied Congress and was really active as like an activist scientist, an early kind of version of that combination that we see more of today, and was able to get DDT banned. And we've seen incredible remediation of landscapes and repopulation of those threatened species since then. And the whole kind of premise of Social Change 101 was examining these single figures, not all of them perfect figures, right? I mean, there was also Andrew Carnegie, who's a complicated person who didn't do all sorts of nice things in his life, but also funded all the libraries that we go to, and talked about how movements can kind of be expressed around or framed around single individuals. I learned so much from this project. I learned so much from working with this guy, and I wanted to keep working with him. So we applied for grants. I wrote a bunch of grants. We got a lot of funding. We expanded the project over time to videos and little video games. You're welcome to check this out whenever you want and go learn. I mean, I was so thrilled to be learning again that it kind of reoriented my career away from I will do whatever video you want to I'd really like to make documentaries. That's something that I love to this day about the career. You talk to a lot of people who you would never speak with otherwise. And, you know, I think that I have carried that into my life outside of my professional time. Like I am always trying to be learning, I think. And I mean that in the most like loose way possible. Learning could be reading a book, but it also could be like, for me, honestly, most often it's watching TikTok. And like learning about animals that I've never heard of, or taking a walk in a park and being curious about what I see and looking it up when I come home. And honestly, also failing. Like sometimes things fail and I learn so much from that. And I'm actually going to talk about a little bit of an educational failure. But yeah, so just I like that project so much. Oh man, I gotta go back to yeah, there we go. I made a push to find clients who might hire me to do more educational things. I emailed science departments at all the schools in Pittsburgh and outside of Pittsburgh. I reached out to researchers whose work looked interesting after just like Googling around. And I had some success. It was slow, but I was able to start building clients who were more interested in producing educational content. While this was all happening, I still had a side hustle doing illustration, which was mostly just like an excuse to draw. It's something I've always done, like I said, and I always feel way healthier when I do it. So I just like can't recommend having a creative outlet highly enough. And so to orient some of that work, I started a big comic project called Crawler. And so I'm just going to scroll through a little bit of samples from it. And then I was like making this in the background at night on weekends, you know, one day a week, finding time. And then I thought, I really like animating. Maybe I'll make it an animation. So I started making concept art, which it's all big, scary bugs. And I'm sorry about that. And also skeletons. I'm kind of a creepy boy. I don't know. And then I got someone to make the drawings into 3D printed articulated stop motion models. I started getting really excited about this animation. And I was starting to turn down video work. So I hired 2 people full time. And I started building this studio where I would have space to make my own weird creative artwork and also continue pursuing these education projects, other work. I'm not going to play this. It's a very gross time lapse of a slime mold, but it'll be there. It'll be there for you for another time. But it was part of like the idea for animating this project. I was going to grow different molds all over stuff in time lapse. It's fine. It was fine. And at that point, I also was working, I don't know how I had energy for this. I guess just like hiring people and seeing a lot of momentum.
Coffee?
I was drinking a lot of coffee. That's absolutely that hasn't stopped, but I don't feel that much energy. That's okay. So I started making in kind of off time with the help of these people I hired, an independent documentary. And I got to a rough cut, and I would love to show everyone the first 2 or 3 minutes of it real quick.
Insects are the most diverse creatures on Earth. With over 1 million known species and an estimated 5 to 8 million unknown ones, they account for at least half of all life on the planet. This incredible diversity means that insects have great impact on the world. They're a major food source for other animals. They recycle nutrients back into the soil. And as pollinators, insects are essential to the vast majority of plants.
One in 3 bites of food that we eat on any given day is something that has to be pollinated by insects. Apples, pears, all orchard fruits, squashes, tomatoes are all pollinated by insects. You could use a paintbrush theoretically, but it's much easier to just get insects to do it naturally.
The majority of pollination is done by bees, and not just honeybees. There are over 20,000 types of bee in the world, and most pollination is done by wild native species, like carpenter bees, bumblebees, and sweat bees.
Bee species are very diverse. Their interaction revolves around resource gathering with plants. These interactions are very important in some environments. The timing of emergence of plants and bees needs to coincide. So some environment will actually be very susceptible to disturbance of these interactions.
Bees are, as a group, keystone species in an ecology, so they provide a function that if they did not exist, the ecology would have a lot of health issues on a broader perspective. Certain bees are generalist bees, and they can work a broad number of species. Honeybees have a semi-long tongue, so they fall into that category. A lot of bumblebees do also. There are other bees that have really evolved very tight relationships with plants that they have co-evolved with, and those plants disappeared or those bees disappeared. You just never know when you pull any species out of an ecology what effect that might have on the other ones.
Bees and other pollinators are struggling. 40% of insect pollinators worldwide are considered threatened. A 2017 study of the 4,300 native bee species.
Pause there before it gets too depressing. Yeah, I wanted to show that, especially because I wanted to emphasize that you don't need expensive gear to tell a story. I shot all that footage on iPhone 5. I bought like a little like $20 clip-on macro lens, and I went for it. If you're going to invest in something, if you are interested in getting into video production, I mean, it's like you really need time to learn about your subject, to meet people who know more about it, to convince them to talk to you about it. And I would say sound is also really important, because if you could watch something that was shot on an iPhone and get used to it really quickly or not worry about it, but if something sounds bad, people are really likely to turn it off. If I can't understand what someone's saying in dialogue, I probably am going to turn it off. So that's maybe too specific, but anyway, I made this rough cut. I got really great feedback. A rough cut is like a first draft. I got really helpful criticisms from my community. And I kind of had this whole plan in place to bring it forward to a next draft and then start to try to sell it and also use it to seek out more researchers who I could talk to for other projects that possibly their institutions could pay for, or if they were seeking grant funding, often they would need a video, something like that. And I was chugging along with that and with my weird art project. and then life just kind of intervened. My parents' health declined. I started dating a woman in New York City, and started traveling back and forth from New York a lot to see her and to spend time with my family in New Jersey. And also, like, Donald Trump was the president, and that was terrifying. And I started organizing with the Pittsburgh Environmental Group, and trying to be like more involved in the community and things like that. And this kind of fell by the wayside, and so did that art project. They went on like a big long hiatus, and I felt a lot of shame around that for a while. But I have since kind of come to think of that as an important lesson, that your career doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists in the context of the rest of your life. And, you know, sometimes that's scary stuff, like your parents get sick, or somebody needs your help. And sometimes that's really wonderful stuff, like, wow, I met someone and fell in love, and it's a little bit more complicated, and I have to go spend time in that relationship. But, you know, it's like kind of something beautiful now when I look at it. And I would just say that I know this is like a career oriented speaker series, but I think it's really important to not miss your life because of work, and to find the right balance, which is challenging. It's different for everybody. It's not something that's one and done. You find the right balance and then you're done. Yeah, that's probably enough.
We should have had this conversation 6 years ago.
I wish someone had been there.
I know, and I'm much older, so I'm listening to you, and I thought, wow, I should have listened to my own advice a long time ago, and I wish you would have been there 10 years ago to give me that same advice.
That's kind of you. I mean, it's easier said than done, and like, I don't think
Very
that
true.
I have it figured out, right? It's like you go through spurts, and like I said, when I was dealing with all this other life stuff, like, I felt really bad about it. I felt like I was letting myself down. You know, I think it's really easy to let your identity get tied to your career, and your self-worth to get tied to a career. And that's not everything. That's not everything at all. And, you know, at the end of the day, people might not remember any of the videos that I made for University of Pittsburgh. I've probably made 300 videos for them. I don't think any of them are going to stand the test of time, but I'm married to that woman who I started dating in New York. My parents' health has improved, and I have a great relationship with them. Like, everything has a little place, and that is not a set fixed place. I don't know, just, I think it's really important.
Like saying it's everything and everyone has a season, a reason, or they're in your life for a lifetime. And, you know, it's hard to understand who's the season, the reason, or the lifetime. And you know, go through life and it's, you know, well, maybe that person or that thing wasn't supposed to be there as long. So, I mean, you're talking, I know Jeremy is like, wow, he's all over Miss Carla's street. It's almost like, it's almost like a sermon, because it's like, Carla, get it together. You should have made these, you know, some of these decisions a long time ago, and then, you know, things happen and you do it and sit back and reflect, and it's just, it was, you know, there's a time for everything. And when you realize that, you know, everything is not for an eternity, it makes life a lot easier.
100%. I think I say this too shall pass a lot.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm glad that resonated. Yeah. Okay. I see that we're like kind of coming up on time, so I'm going to wrap up real fast. I had this experience where, yeah, I got kind of out of practice with making my own work. I was just making enough to pay my bills and to pay my employees' bills. And it honestly, like, after that year, I was really burned out. I downsized my studio back down to just me and part-time hiring other people every once in a while. And instead of making this huge, overcomplicated comic plus animation, plus there's like a game component, all these big dreams, I started making zines. Zines are really easy. I don't know if people are familiar with zines, just like a little book, and you could staple it together. You could print it at Staples, you print it at your house, and it was cheap. I started doing zine fairs. I met a lot of really nice people. It was a way simpler, calmer thing. And it was also a place where I could start putting all of the research and information that I had gotten for the documentary that I made, as well as starting to put some of that art that I had made for my big complicated project out into the world for people to see it. And that, I think, is another important thing. Share what you do, and also share the labor of what you do. This is me getting married in my backyard. It was nice. Okay.
Oh.
And yeah, I kind of had a really healing year after that, and focused on, getting my life into balance. 2020, of course, messed that up for everybody. I made some nice projects, though. I made my first Kickstarter, which went pretty well. It was for an RPG series of zines about a future post-apocalypse kind of world where you used science concepts like bioremediation to fight weird, yucky evil. And there were a lot of bears, and sorry about that. That one's scary. Nice people, etc. And slowly kind of started making this story more and more about climate. I upgraded from my iPhone to a really fancy macro camera. I started taking footage of bees and things again. We could watch that maybe while we're talking if anyone has questions. And just really quickly now, I'm working for the Museum of Natural History. I've gotten to hire an incredible big crew of 6 people to interview all these different folks. You might recognize this very important person right here, Summer Lee, who hopefully will be representing us in the State House. And it's about I'm getting to meet tons of different people around Pittsburgh in the rural counties surrounding Pittsburgh who are working on making this a better place. And that gives me a lot of hope in a time that's kind of scary. And I think my kind of like parting sentiment around that project and what feels really the best about that project is that I'm not doing it alone. Filmmaking and everything else is done better with friends. I really believe in the power of collective action. I really believe in the power of engaging with community and finding a way that works for you to do that. I mean, like I said, I've organized with Sunrise Movement and other environmental groups. I've been a volunteer nature field trip guide at the Audubon Center. I've taught free workshops in PPS. It can look a million different ways. It doesn't have to be anything formal that fits on your resume. I just think it's important to put energy into your community because you will get it back. You will meet people who inspire you. You'll feel really good just because you did it. And you will also get career opportunities. You'll find opportunities by being out and about and meeting people who you wouldn't normally find in your comfort zone. So that was a rushed ending, but like I said, I can just play some of this fancier footage. And if people have questions, maybe come off mute and you can ask me while this is going. If you don't have questions, that's okay too.
What's your favorite anime to work on?
My favorite anime?
Yeah.
You mean to make myself or something that I've seen?
To make yourself.
Oh gosh. That's a really good question. I don't know. I mean, I think some of my favorite animations out in the world are Miyazaki. So what's his name? His name's Hayao Miyazaki, but the movies are like Princess Mononoke or Howl's Moving Castle. That kind of animation has always been really incredible to me, and I would love to learn how to make it. As far as what I do myself, I like to animate by hand. I think it's the most fun. It takes the longest. I don't do a lot of it professionally because no one can afford the amount of hours it takes, but I do it for myself. And it's really meditative. It's calming, which I also get from staring at bees and flowers. If you couldn't tell, this also makes me feel really calm and relaxed and kind of connected. Does that answer your question, Trent?
Yeah, thank you.
Does anyone here have interest in getting into film or getting into any sort of storytelling?
I mean, not really. I mean, I do have like a dream of like, well, I have done like a lot of things lately in my life, even though my life has not really started. I made like a couple comics myself.
Oh yeah? What were they about?
Yeah. So I'm not really like a really good like maker of people, so I use stickmen instead. Now the way I use stickmen, I use them like as like a good like a little movement, like an anime movement, basically.
Sure.
I put
And
that
oh, go ahead.
stickman vibe into anime. It makes it like it's actually pretty cool.
I'm a huge fan of stickman. I have to tell you, it's like not really important how things look. I don't know. When I think about the stuff that I enjoy, it's not all beautiful and slick, and someone didn't spend 10,000 hours on each little shaded aspect or finger or whatever. It's like more important that I think you try it, you get it out, and the more stick people that you draw, the better you're going to be at telling stories with stick people. I don't know. But Pittsburgh has a pretty cool comics community. It's like super supportive, super friendly. For a year, I did like I had a retainer, so like a monthly kind of agreement with a comics educator here, and I can probably find those videos. He made a lot of free educational content that I thought was really helpful for people getting started in comics. Let's see. Comics. He's kind of a curmudgeon, but he is smart. Ooh. Yeah, there we go. I can send you these links later. Here, let me stop sharing for a sec. Hi. Any other thoughts? I know we're at 5-ish, but does anyone else have questions or projects they want to tell me about?
For any of our students who either already want to go into a creative artistic career, or for students in the future who might say, you know what, I didn't think I could do this, but maybe I can. What is the the little nugget of wisdom or piece of advice either that you received that you wish you'd gotten earlier, or something that you realized on your own that you wish someone had told you?
That's a great question. I think the first thing that comes to mind, it's something I already said, but don't do it yourself. Don't feel like you have to be in any sort of project alone. It might not be that you're getting someone to come to the table and draw your stick people with you, but having someone to show it to, having a community of people who show you their drawings, or having someone who would split a table with you at a show, split a fee to enter a thing, collaborate with you, combine ideas. I mean, it's like, I think for a long time, I felt like I had to do it myself and make my own career and make my own way as an individual, and like a strong individual voice was really important. And I think that's all very silly now. I think that if I had known earlier, I would never try to do really anything alone, because there's so much joy in doing it with other people and so much support. And you really can be more ambitious, dream bigger, and like have twice the energy and kind of encouragement to reflect back and forth to like when it gets kind of tough, because creative careers can be a struggle, and it's like made so much better by having a pal or two along. I don't know if that's great advice, but the other thing I would say is you don't have to go to college for it. Go to college for something that lights you up and that you want to learn about and that you love learning about, and like audit a couple of art classes and just meet all those people and then go hang out with them after class and do what they do, because they're going to want to draw, they're going to want to paint, sing, do whatever it is. But that's okay. There's a million ways to do that. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, have you seen that the Pittsburgh arts community has, I guess, become more I guess closer in the year since you started? It seems like it has really grown, and it seems like there's a lot more for creatives to get involved in and to collaborate with others. Have you noticed that as well in Pittsburgh?
Absolutely. I think that's very true. I think when I was first here, it was a pretty small scene, which was nice in a way, in that everybody kind of knew each other. But that also gets kind of old kind of fast, in the sense that, like, you want new blood, you want inspiration, you want also for the scene to be accessible to anybody who wants to drop in, whether they are in high school and they're young, or they are 60 and they're just discovering a love of art. And so I think when I was first here in 2004, it did feel a little inaccessible. You kind of had to look like me. You kind of had to be like a scumbag white guy, and like you could get a show. And now there's way more cool venues. I would say if you're trying to get into the art scene, the best place to start is the Penn Ave Arts Crawl in Garfield. I think that's all back up and running post, kind of with pandemic restrictions.
Yeah.
But there's a beautiful variety of work and people who are showing there. And like, I think Pittsburgh is like, it's changing in such funny ways. Not all of them feel cleanly positive. It's complicated. But I love that there is more opportunity for artists, even if it feels a little more chaotic. There's more people around. That also means that there's more people to come and look at your work, buy your work, or suggest an opportunity where you maybe don't have to be in a gallery putting your stuff on the wall, but they say, hey, I want to commission a tattoo. I want to work with you on a song. I want to work with you on whatever. It really benefits us to have a bigger community, which just like brings more and more creativity. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That was, I remember having students in our program, and it's like, well, I want to be an artist. And I'm like, yeah, 20 years ago, I thought, where else are you going to work? So now it's, have you connected with this organization or that organization? I mean, there's so much more that didn't exist in 2001 when I first started. And, even like graphic design for a company was very, difficult to get into. So I've definitely seen the growth in Pittsburgh. Like you said, it's complicated. Some of it is great and some of it, okay, we're still working on it.
Still are. That's right.
Absolutely.
Any other questions before we give a rousing round of applause for Mr. Michael and send you all on your way for the weekend?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Michael. Please, if anybody has any questions for Mr. Michael that occurred to them after the fact, please let me know and I can pass them along to him. But otherwise, thank you very, very much for your time and effort. Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Michael was kind enough to just drop his email address in the chat. So if you have any questions,
you got it.
Email him and
feel free to
check
reach
out
out.
his website too. I had a lot of fun trolling.
Yeah.
So
this is great. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend, sir.
Thanks. You too, everyone. Be well.
You too. We're gonna stop.